Welcome to the office. Today, I want to walk you through how to build a foam core model in about an hour. It shouldn't take more than that. But we're not going to design and build something today that's going to be perfect. This is going to be a study model, or what we call a study model. And really the intent of this is to just get our ideas across and kind of understand the proportion, the massing, things like that. This is for a cabin that I designed that's currently in construction. And I just kind of want to see how it works and kind of walk you through the process. You can feel free to follow along, or if not, just kind of hang out with me in the studio as we build this model together. So a couple of first things you're going to need is you're going to need some kind of ruler. This is an architectural scale. This helps us when we're doing things that are drawn down at a certain scale to where we can measure it easier without having to do math. I don't know if you're good at math, but I'm not. Surprisingly, I'm an architect. I'm not very good at math. So this helps me out with not having to do the math. And then I like to use just regular straight edges. Got this one at Office Depot. I don't really use this for measuring. I use this more for cutting a straight line because it's metal and it's got the cork on it so it doesn't slide around as much. You're going to also need some kind of blade to cut with. And I'm going to use the basic tools today. I'm not going to use anything fancy. I do have, a lot fancier tools that I could work with, but I'm going to just try to start simple with something you might have. This is just an X-Acto. Get this at anywhere. But the key on this is when you're using your X-Acto, make sure you use a sharp blade. Buy a bunch of extra blades. Here's some spare blades that I have. I also have a big pack of like hundreds of these. But always use your sharp blade. It's going to create a cleaner cut and it's not going to get the ragged edges. It's not going to pull the foam and it's also safer. You're less likely to cut yourself with this. You're going to need just a pencil to mark things with. And then when we're sticking stuff together, I just use this tacky glue. You could use regular Elmer's glue like you used in school, elementary school. Some people like to use hot glue. The problem I have with hot glue, well, first off, hot glue is good because it's quick and it dries. But the problem is it's got some thickness to it, which kind of messes up the way the foam core goes together. And I can show you that when I build it. But also one thing that happened to me is when I was in school, I built models with hot glue. And I was in school in California and left my model in the car and I came back and the whole model fell apart because it was hot and it melted the glue and it didn't stick. So I like to use the tacky glue because it holds it together. It's easy, but it doesn't dry super fast. It doesn't leave a ton of mess. So it actually makes it more methodical so that you're kind of taking your time and putting things together. These are just something I use for woodworking and things, model making dioramas. These are just called 1, 2, 3 blocks. It just helps me kind of hold things up when you're putting it together. And then there's a few other things that we'll get into once we start building the model. But first thing, before you build the model, you're going to need some kind of design to work off of. So I just printed some plans. These are just sort of the floor plans, elevations that I have from my construction set. But then what I did is I printed it to scale. And so there's elevations that I printed. And I just printed it on 8.5 by 11 and then like taped it together. I have a large format plotter that I could use here, but I wanted to do something simple that anybody could do. So you see, I just printed 8.5 by 11 letter size here in the US and just taped it together. So I printed my elevations and then I also printed a floor plan. And so we'll use this kind of as our starting point to measure off of. You don't have to have this. It just makes your job a lot easier. If you have a Revit model or an AutoCAD file that you could take measurements off of, you can use that as well. So let's get into it. Let's start building this model. All right, so let's get into building this model. So you'll see here, I printed this floor plan. It's top down. It's got dimensions that we need on here. So the first thing I want to do is build a floor for this, just so I have a base to work off of. Another reason is because in this particular cabin, there's going to be some overhangs and some columns that come down that attach to the ground. So I want to have some place to attach that to. So first thing you need to do is this one has the dimensions on here. So I already kind of know what that is. And that's one thing you could do when you know you're gonna make a model. If you have the AutoCAD file, you can just start adding dimensions that you know you're gonna need. So I'm just gonna look at this and take these dimensions. A little note on precision. This says 42'8" and 1/8. I'm probably not gonna deal with that level of precision on the model. So I'll just probably do 42'8", 50'4". It's going to be close enough for what we need. A little quick note on scale. We build models for a couple of reasons. We want them to sort of use that as a way to study, but also it needs to be of a certain size that will tell us the information we need. So I decided to print this at a scale so that every, let me show you an example of this. Every 1 foot equals, every 1/8 of an inch on this equals 1 foot. So the way I had checked to see what scale we're at is I use this scale here. And I know in commercial architecture, most doors are 3 feet. So I'm gonna look at this door and I'm gonna measure and see what it comes out to. And you can see on the scale that this 1/4 inch, 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, that's 3 feet. And if I put that against the door, then now I can see, focus here. Now I can see that that's 3 feet. So now I know that this drawing is every 1/4 of an inch equals 1 foot on real world. So I'm gonna start, this is a 1/4 inch. The reason I did it this size, 1/4 inch scale, is it's gonna be big enough for me to see all the rooms, to see how everything relates, but it's not so massive that I can't really get a sense of all the spaces, and I don't have enough foam core for that. It's also not too small that I'm not gonna be able to get a lot of the detail in there. So let's start with cutting the base. Here's your piece of foam core. And foam core consists of basically 3 layers, a center layer of foam and 2 layers of paper on the outside. And so now we have a mark. Now we have a mark of where we need to cut. And if we double check that with the scale, we can see that this is gonna be 42 and a half, 42, 6, 7, 8. 42 foot 8. So that's exactly what we needed based on the dimension here. And we're gonna do the same on this side. And again, I don't build models to be super precise. These are gonna be study models. The funny thing is when you're in architecture school, you build so many models. And it's very useful, especially when you're learning how to do architecture, to build a bunch of models to sort of understand what you're doing. But in the real world, we don't really build that many models. Well, maybe some firms do. I don't build that many models. I can get the information I need just basically from the Revit model that we make. And that's usually enough for me to sort of be able to figure out what I need to know. And before I make this cut, I pull back and visually look at it and see, like, does this look square to me? So I do that before I cut it. Okay, so when we're cutting, you're gonna have this straight edge here kind of pushed up against the foam core, and you're gonna hold it in such a way to where you're having even pressure all along this straight edge. And you don't wanna start here, because what happens is as you start cutting, your blade might push it and you're gonna end up with a crooked cut. The other thing is you have to have your fingers only on the metal part, never sticking over. And I think you can understand why when you're coming with the blade. So always on this. If you have a longer cut, you might have to start here, cut, and then push it down on this end and then move your hand to the other side. My hand is big enough to kind of grab it on both sides, and I feel pretty confident that it's not going to move on me. When you're cutting, obviously sharp side goes down. You don't want to cut in one big heavy cut, and you're not trying to cut through it all at one time. What you want to do is you want to make multiple passes. Like I said earlier, you have 3 layers on here. You have 1 paper, 1 foam, and then 1 paper. So I like to do 3 passes. First pass gets through that paper layer. Second pass might get through the foam and maybe some of the paper. And then that last pass is going to get through everything. So you're going to just take your time and go slow. And you're not going to move your wrist. Your straight cut is going to be based on where your elbow is and keeping your arm straight. So by moving your elbow, that keeps it straight. And you want to be kind of straight aligned with the ruler. And you don't want to be crooked. But the more you move your wrist, the more you're gonna get these weird kind of lines. So keep your elbow tucked in against your body, and you're gonna make your first pass to try to get through the paper, second pass through the foam, and a little bit more paper, and then last pass should get through everything. And hopefully you did, and if not, just make more passes. There's nothing wrong with doing 5, 6 passes just to make sure you get through. And then what you're gonna find is that even if you got through this corner where these two lines come together, possibly still has some paper on it. So you're just gonna go through and you're gonna focus on that corner specifically just to make sure that it gets all the way through. Okay. And you can see it still kind of hangs on there because of this little piece right here. So we're just gonna turn it around and just kind of cut that piece of paper just to free it up. Okay, so there we go. We have our first piece of foam core cut, and that's gonna be our base for the rest of the model. Next step, now that we have the base, is we're gonna wanna build walls as they go up. And the walls are never gonna be, well, depending on your design, are probably not gonna be just square. So let's look at one of these walls here. Let's do this wall first. No, let's do this wall first. So this one we're gonna be looking this way on the building, and this is the entry door here. And so I'm gonna start there because it's maybe a little simpler. And so here's the elevation for that. Here's the entry door. And so you'll see the design of this, the wall kind of comes up, goes up again, and then comes back down. And then we got some windows inside there. We got a door inside there. So we just have to transfer this onto a piece of foam core to be able to cut it. So I keep a bunch of foam core scraps around because, I don't know, woodworker in me, I don't like to throw things away if they're still good. So I'm just using a piece of scrap and just seeing if it fits. And again, I'm just kind of using the same technique that I used before because I don't really like measuring. I'm gonna just make sure that this very bottom line of my elevation is on the foam core. And I'm just gonna use my X-Acto and just cut marks of where everything goes. This is just a quick tip on how you can make quick study models. Again, we're not doing a precision, really detailed model. It's not a final model as we call it. This is just a study model. So I just use this to kind of get my ideas down and to be able to study the proportions, things like that. And I may be lazy here, but the purpose of the study models is to just get it built quick so that you can understand what you're designing. So I'm just gonna mark all these, and I'm marking basically 4 corners of each one. And again, you could also just spray glue this elevation onto it and cut it straight out. And maybe I'll show you that in the next one. But this is just my quick method to mark it. And if I missed anything, I can always come back and measure it. So now I'm gonna take my pencil and just darken it up so I could see everything. So I went from this corner here to this corner. This one went at this angle from this corner to here. And looks like I missed one, so let's put this back and just line it up again. There we go. Then I'm gonna go from here to here for this. Oops, that's not my pencil. From here to here. And this one comes straight down. This one comes straight down. The reason I don't like to spray glue everything onto the paper is I still use the paper for measurements, and when you start gluing it on and cutting around it, you lose the paper. And so maybe, you know, the fix for that is you maybe just print multiple copies, but this method seems to work for me. Okay, so there we go. There's our shape based on this wall here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just cut out the main shape. Same method, straight edge, X-Acto. Another tip, I'm about to cut this line here. And so you might want to do it like this to where you're cutting like this. But then what happens is if you overshoot it, you're going into your saved piece, your good piece. So I always turn it around so that the end of my cut goes past the piece that I want to save. Okay. So there's our entry wall. This door is going to be easy, so I'm going to cut that out real quick. And when we do these study models, I don't typically add doors and windows. That would be more of a final model or a little more detailed model. So when we just cut it out as an opening, and you just use that as your starting point. Again, I was trying to be lazy and not use my straight edge, but let's just use the straight edge to do it right. So here's what you're gonna find when you're cutting an inside piece. Is you're gonna push down, do a few passes, but you'll never quite get that last corner where the vertical cut and the horizontal cut come together. So as you get through, you'll start to see a mark on the back, and you'll see where it doesn't quite connect. So you just flip it over and just cut that piece of paper just like we did earlier. Okay, so now on this outside, we have a clean door, and we're gonna do the same process for the other windows. And this one, I'm just gonna freehand. And you'll see I'm just cutting through the paper first. And that's my first pass, is just to get through the paper. Because what that does is that sets a groove for the blade to get into, so that when you do the next cut, it's not going to move as much because you already have sort of a place for it to go. Okay, so now we have our first passes. Now I'm just gonna go through again and just try to do my second pass getting through. And I'm gonna try to stop as short as possible so that it doesn't go past where the vertical line is. And I could already start to feel my blades getting a little dull. It's starting to kind of pull the foam and crunch. So now, after I finish these windows, might be a good time to swap my blades out. Okay, and now you go to the back side and you kind of look to make sure to see if you have marks on where it hit the paper. Some of it didn't, so I'm just gonna go through it again. And maybe it doesn't go all the way through, but it goes enough to where I know where that line is. Maybe on these bottom ones. Okay, I got some good marks. And then now I'll just kind of complete that cut on this side of the paper. And this is another reason why we do it at the scale that we do, because if I did it at an 1/8 inch scale, which is even smaller, it'd be almost impossible to cut these little windows out with the tools that we have. Okay, so we should have them all cut. Now I'm just gonna poke them out. And if there's any areas that drag, you can kind of just put your blade in there and cut the paper wherever it's kind of sticking. And then you'll see there's some kind of ragged edges on there. So what I do is I just take my blade and just kind of stick it in there and cut those little ragged edges off, and it just kind of straightens them out a little bit. Okay, so there we go. We have this wall now cut and ready to put onto the next one. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the rest of the elevations off camera here, and we'll come back in a sec. Okay, so I got all the elevations cut, and now we're gonna start gluing our walls down to our floor plan. But I want to make a quick note here just so we can understand this is the foam core has thickness to it. And when I cut the elevation, the wall, it's based on the outside edge to the outside edge. And so if we put this wall and glue this down here, and then we take this wall and glue this right up against it and butt it, you'll see at the end it sticks over about 1/4 inch, which is about the thickness of the foam core. So here's a trick that I use to eliminate the need to cut it 1/4 inch short. And also, if I were to butt these two together and glue it like that, you see the raw edge on this? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna decide which one's gonna be sticking as normal, which is gonna be this wall, and then this one's gonna overlap it. And then, like I said, the foam core has 3 layers. I'm gonna cut through the first 2 layers and leave the paper on the outside, so that way it can go together, but it hides the exposed edge, and then it eliminates that 1/4 inch. So we can come in and measure just 1/4 inch in, which is the thickness of the foam core board, or if it may not be 1/4 inch, maybe it's 3/16. Again, I'm being lazy and quick here. I'm just going to line up the thickness of the foam core and just draw a line. And so that's how much I need to cut out of the first 2 layers, but leave the last layer. And this we're just going to be extra careful, because if you go too far and cut through the paper, then it kind of defeats the purpose here. And so we're just going to very gently, now that we have a line, make sure we're going through just the foam and that top layer of paper. And again, my blade's starting to sound a little crunchy, so I might need to change it out after this. And then once we get down to the end there, we are just going to peel the foam part off. And now what we're left with is a piece of paper edge. So as we glue these two together, it overlaps and it gives us a nice clean edge without exposing the foam core. And now we'll lay out properly when we start putting it onto the floor plan. So now if we do this and we do the overlap, you can see now it lines up to where it needs to be. So I'm going to do that to the rest of the elevations, and then we'll start gluing it down. I'm going to change my blade out real quick as I find them. Where did my blades go? There we go. Okay, so the X-Acto blade, to change it out, you're going to turn this so it loosens it up. You're going to grab it on the edges, pull it out, get a clean one. Put it into the slot there. And then tighten it back down. And then we're going to take this old one and we're going to wrap it in tape. And so that when we throw it away, it's not going to poke anybody. And let's finish these cuts here. Okay, so now we have an inventory of cut parts, starting with the base. We have a wall that we can put on here. We have another wall here, and then a wall going in this direction. All right, so now we're gonna start gluing this down. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this glue and we're gonna apply it to the edge of the wall that we are gluing down to the base. And we're just gonna do a thin bead. You don't want to overdo it. The more glue you have, the messier it gets. So we're gonna put it right on the edge, and this is where the block comes in to kind of help keep it straight. And one thing we're gonna do before we do that is we're gonna add some tape to the bottom so that helps hold it in place. I always use these drafting dots. These are things that I kind of had around when I was hand drafting, but you can always just use blue tape as well. Something not super sticky so that it doesn't tear the paper away. So now we have the glue applied. We're going to precisely put it right up against the edge. And if any glue kind of comes out, try to clean that up, to squeeze out before it dries. And we're gonna just put the tape up to hold it in place. I'll put the block right up against it. And now we have our first wall in place. We're gonna let that dry for a bit. Skinny squeeze out, cleaned up. And then once it's kind of like able to stand on its own, then we're gonna put the next wall on it. And so the next wall is where we cut the paper away. We're gonna apply glue to the bottom and to this side and hold those two together. So let me grab some drafting dots. Just put that there and about there, grab a block. And just double check I'm putting the right side correct. And then we're just gonna apply thin layer. If you ever went through architecture school, you probably recognize that sound when everybody's making models and they're trying to get their glue out and tapping it along on their desk. Might be good sound, nostalgia, or might be traumatizing. Not sure how your architecture school went. And again, we're just gonna place it right on the edge as precisely as possible. Then we're gonna take these two edges where the corner meets and we are going to put some tape there just to hold those together. Get any squeeze out. And we're just gonna kind of have some patience and let it sit there for a bit and dry up. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and build the rest of the exterior walls and we'll check in a sec. All right, so now that we have the exterior of the building kind of dried up and mocked up, we could stop here if we're just doing a study model to kind of figure out the shape of things and the overall form. But next, for this model, we're gonna start building some of the interior walls. And that's where we're going to, again, take the floor plan and we're gonna just start measuring some of these walls in here using our quarter inch scale here. And we're gonna measure this wall to know the length of it. But then what's also important is we need to know the height of it if it's going all the way up. So you could cut a section into your building and do some measurements there. But since my model's not always super precise, I'm just gonna take a regular ruler and just put it in here and measure what that height is, and that's going to be my height from here on out, because it's going to vary based on the model that I've built. So I'm going to cut some of those, and then we'll check back in. All right, so now that the interior walls are cut and put in place, it's time to do the last step, which is just going to be to make the roof. Everything's dried and cured, so now I'm just going to take all of these drafting dots off, and hopefully it's still pretty solid. Okay, there we go. Okay, so to cut the roof, we could do a couple of things. First thing you could do is you could take your elevations and you would measure one side, which would be, this looks like 24 feet right here. And then you would take the other elevation and measure that side. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna measure it off the model. Since my model making wasn't perfect, maybe things shifted a bit. So I know that based on the elevations, I'm gonna have a bit of an overhang on either side. So a 2-foot overhang on the center side, 1 foot on the other side. So what I could do is I could just measure this wall that we have built, which is 21, and then I'm gonna go 2 feet, 22, 23, and then 1 foot back, 24. So 24, same as the elevation, so that one worked out. And then this back wall, I have a foot on this side, 1 foot out this side, but then this one I wanna go all the way to the edge so we get an overhang here, so I'm just gonna measure that entire thing there. And then before I cut it, I'm just going to kind of place the model on it. Does that seem about right? Yeah, that seems about right. So time to cut. There we go, there's our first roof. Okay, now we'll quickly measure and cut the second roof. And we'll do this one just looking at the elevations this time to show you how that one works. So this I'm just going to measure 22, 23 and a half. 23 and a half. Well, 51 and a half, because same as the other side. Okay, so there we have it. We have a completed model with walls, interior walls, floor, and roof. Let's take a quick look. Okay, so there it is. There's still a couple of things that we could do if we wanted to explore this further and make it more realistic. For example, there's a little piece of wall that needs to be built here, which we can build. There's also a column and column beam that need to go in here in reality to hold this up. But I don't really want to put that in because I want to be able to take the roof off and look at the inside. But really, this model is ready to study and kind of get a sense of how it'd feel. A lot of times we might take this and just kind of look into it and see how it feels. So I'm looking at, in particular, this large sort of covered area in this corner, and study that a bit to see how it feels. Is the roof too low? Is it too high? How does it feel in the space? And as you can see from the photo of the construction, we're pretty close. It's pretty close to what is actually being built out there. We might also look at the openings on the facade. Do they feel the right size for a cabin? Are they too big? Are they too small? And then I might even take this out during the daytime and do some sun studies on the inside. And if you want, I can show you how to do some sun studies using a gnomon and a sundial, things that I learned during my master's degree in building science that kind of help you understand the reality of what the daylight's gonna look like inside a space. But that'd probably be a separate video, but let me know if you wanna see that. We can look into that. So there you go, pretty simple. I don't know, maybe took a little bit more than an hour with recording and everything, just to kind of put this together.